and welcome to Totally Unrelated. My name is Diana.
And I am Irina.
And we're back with a book review. Sort of. What happened is I managed to channel Irina's rage once again into creating content, and I figure we can get a decent 2 episodes out of this. So, Irina, what do you have for me this time?
Okay, so this time I have The Righteous Mind. I mean, not just my own, but the book, The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion, written by Jonathan Haidt. And this is one of those books that I hated before reading. Sometimes it happens to me. In the case of this book, it was based solely on its fans. God, I hated the people that explained to me what this book was about. So, I sort of started reading it in some sort of hate-read rage or some sort of thing. And it turns out it was not the book's fault that some of the fans were, not the brightest. And Haidt, even if I highly disliked him in some interviews, it was a lot more intellectually honest in the book than I was prepared to expect of him,
Yeah, I also remember following him briefly on Twitter and rolling my eyes several times at his takes, because he is very much with the freedom of speech on campuses and both sides are crazy sort of crowd. But yeah, as you said, despite our ambivalence towards him, we're going to be quite charitable to him in this episode.
I'm not even sure if, charitable is the right word, but I think we're going to be just.
I mean, we're all about being just and yeah.
Right. I mean, it's called Righteous Mind, this book. So, So, yeah. Okay. So, all in all, this was a decent book. I do not have enough knowledge of the subject matter to say, where the cracks in the science were, in case they were. But the parts that I actually know about were significantly decent for a book for the general public. And the parts where Haidt gives his own opinion are quite obviously stated as an opinion. And the parts where his claims are controversial from a scientific point of view, he really takes the time to give the readers a heads up. So honestly, I don't think I can ask for more from a book. And I cannot stop myself from comparing it to another book that tackles a somewhat related subject. I mean, also ethics and morality. And the book is called Moral Tribes by Joshua Green. And this book I started reading, sort of prepared to like it. And I ended up wanting to smack the author over the head, because the book was an exercise in the author telling you that if you disagree with something he says, it's just because you didn't get it.
Oh, you see, like, that's such a wuss move right there. Like, why assume people are stupid when it's just likely they are wrong? This is what we do, so...
Yeah. So anyway, back to Haidt and The Righteous Mind. As you said, you managed to bug me to write. You generally bug me to write because
I very gently persuaded you to do so. Don't give me a bad reputation. I'm a very gentle persuader.
Well, yes, but it is true that at least I, if you don't want me to use the we,
the royal we,
the royal we or the editorial we, I at least needed a swift kick in the butt.
I mean, we all do. And, I can't help the fact that you are at your most eloquent when in rage mode. I was on the lookout for a possible triggering event. And I found that in the guise of Abigail Shapiro. Now, in case anyone doesn't know who she is, which is probably most people who are not as insanely interested in YouTube stuff like we are. She's a self-described conservative influencer and YouTuber. And she has gained a certain notoriety on that platform by annoying millions of viewers with her ubiquitous ads. And that's all fine, until one day I stumbled upon one of her clips that I knew would annoy the hell out of you.
Well, and you turned out to be right. I mean, I keep referring to her in my head as female Shapiro because she also has a brother. So,
The much more famous Ben. Yes, Ben Shapiro. Yes.
And the clip of hers was a review of the book, of Haidt's book. And, I got into a rage and I applied pen to paper or fingers to keyboard or something like that. And here we are.
Before we begin, just a heads up in case you suspect we could be misrepresenting Abby's statement about the book, which is like, how dare you suspect us? But if you do, you'll find a link to her video in the description. And more importantly, though, I would say it's a better use of your time if you read Haidt's book rather than view her clip. But, it's your own time. Do as you wish.
Yes, I mean, if you're not sure, if you're really interested in the subject, please do listen to our podcast to the end. But yeah, I highly recommend anybody to read this book.
Yeah.
So the book has 3 parts. The first part is called Intuitions Come First, Strategic Reasoning Comes Second. The second part of the book, it's there is more to morality than harm and fairness. And the third part, it's called Morality That Binds and Blinds. So the first thing I want to say about what Madame Shapiro and all the others that pissed me off got wrong about this book is that they kept referring or describing this book as a prescriptive book, not a descriptive book, which is actually what the book really is about.
So it's not a book about how things ought to be, but rather about how things are, at least to the best of our knowledge, right?
Well, at least to the best of the way Haidt managed to do his research. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, I'm not even sure if the get wrong is the right way to put it, because I feel for a lot of these people, they do it on purpose because it fits their narrative. But Haidt is not looking to tell you how to do morality the right way. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have the moments in which he tells his own opinion, but that is not how he does the science part. So Haidt is more looking to tell how morality does us, that good or bad. Also, I have to admit that Haidt had me at hello, sort of, because in the introduction, he says this: people who devote their lives to studying something often come to believe that the object of their fascination is the key to understanding everything. And like, this is what annoys the shit out of me when it comes to, like the Hararis of the world. This need for this overarching big narrative that explains, well, everything through the tiny little thing that they previously decided upon.
Yeah, I mean, we might need to do an episode on Harari as well, although...
No.
Oh, yeah. I mean, unlike Haidt's book, which we both read, I don't think that I would prioritize Harari's books on my reading list, considering the bad reviews, the abysmal reviews you gave to me of his books. So
I'm sorry we weren't doing a podcast way back when. I read his books and actually took notes and everything. But
you still kept the notes, right?
Of course.
Okay. You got the receipts.
Yes. Okay. But I have to say that also in Harari's place, his fans annoy me even more than he does. So,
It's usually the fanboys are a part of the problem, so to speak.
I have to recognize, in the spirit of intellectual honesty, that he has a lot of fangirls who are just as annoying.
Is it Harari we're talking about, or Haidt?
Harari.
Okay. So
Harari has a lot of fangirls also, so it's not just the fanboys.
Oh God, yeah.
Well, before moving on from Harari, I have to say that my dog, is joining us again. So if you hear any, weird
scratchings
noises,
and
screeching,
barking,
it's my dog,
yeah.
And I don't know if I should, make myself that much of a geek and tell people the name of my dog. Should I?
Yes.
I mean, my dog is called Sam, and he has a brother, Dean. And well, they are just the two puppies, and they are called from the brothers from Supernatural because I am a geek. Okay, so I'm lame. Moving on. Part one of Haidt's book mostly drives home the idea that moral intuitions arise automatically and almost instantaneously, long before moral reasoning has a chance to get started, and those first intuitions tend to drive our later reasoning. And Haidt says that moral reasoning is a skill we humans evolved to further our social agendas, not to find the truth, to justify our own actions, and to defend the teams we already belong to. And in part two, this is where Haidt presents his research and introduces the idea of foundations of morality. What are the things by which we measure certain actions as being moral or not? Or rather, do we use the same instruments to do so? He tries to argue that there's more to morality than the ideas of harm and fairness. You know, even though he clearly likes these foundations, you know, even for his personal morals, the point he is driving home is not about whether we should or shouldn't place in the morality basket more issues than harm and fairness. The point he is making is that for some people, there are more issues they associate with morality, and they do so beyond their own control. And no matter if some of us, you know, roll our eyes or protest, this will continue to happen. So for some people, liberty, loyalty, authority, and sanctity also come into play when they assess what is moral. Part 3 of the book is where he tries to show the usefulness of being aware of the information from parts 1 and 2. And here is where he tries to explain, you know, especially in the US, the difference in liberals and conservatives. He tries to explain that when we talk to someone else, and even when we address a group, we must not think that they perceive moral issues in the same way as us. And we must not think that we can convince them that what they see as moral values are somehow outside of the realm of morality. The only real way forward is if we take the time to realize what our partner of conversation holds as actual moral values, and we try to address those issues in a way that they will recognize. And also here in part 3, Haidt makes a more controversial claim that humans also evolved to have group morality, but he puts this, you know, into perspective and notes that most scientists are not on board with anything other than individual evolutionary traits. Mm-hmm. So, Madame Shapiro, because she's the one who started this.
She is the trigger point, yes.
The trigger. Madame Shapiro starts her discussion of Haidt's book with part 3 as a way to teach her audience, you know, how to talk to liberals, as you were saying, you know, conservatives versus liberals. Mm-hmm. The death match. So,
the eternal struggle.
Mm-hmm. So not even 2 sentences into the presentation, and I already disagree with her. Because, you know, first of all, she says that Haidt is a liberal, which, you know, he might as well be if we think about the European standards, but he's definitely not what conservatives and reactionaries in the United States say when they mean liberal.
I mean, I think the main point about this is that they are very fuzzy about the definition of liberal. I think it's sort of a catch-all term for all the people they disagree with many a times, because they get specific in their definition only when convenient. So
absolutely. And, you know, Haidt himself did not say in the book what she says. Well, she says that he wrote the book to teach liberals about conservatives. And just for accuracy, that was the dog, just for accuracy, I would like to quote from the book, where Haidt actually says why he wrote the book. And he says, I have tried to use intuitionism while writing this book. My goal is to change the way a diverse group of readers, liberals and conservatives, secular and religious, think about morality, politics, religion, and each other.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Haidt is part of the free speech crowd and has actually been invited onto several conservative-leaning shows. In fact, Abby's much more famous brother, as we said, Ben, my wife, who is a doctor, says what pussies are a sign of infection, Shapiro, had him as a guest on his show, and I actually found that he listed Haidt's book among his top 5 reading recommendations for American conservatives. And, he also introduced Haidt as a former leftist. So, as I mentioned above, it's annoying because leftist and liberal are used sometimes interchangeably, even though when convenient, it will be pointed out that they are different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, female Shapiro gives definitions for words like liberal, leftist, and some weird word she made up, wokeist. So it is so fucking amusing because she starts the discussion by saying that this book is important because it helps us understand each other, which, is true. And then she plunges into a tirade about how wokeists want to tear down all conservative morals and start from the beginning. Like, fuck knows what beginning, like the Big Bang, presumably, I don't know. But she spends a good few minutes from a somewhat short presentation just to build this straw man of a wokeist and leftist and to make sure her audience cannot help but hate the group, who by her definition want to destroy everything that is common sense and that conservatives hold dear.
Yeah, I think the point of throwing all these ill-defined terms into play is, one, to muddy the discussion, and two, to perform some form of divide and conquer on their opponents, because initially Abby kind of love bombs liberals, saying they are so much reasonable than the leftists, and the other made-up term, leftists are basically just another name for all the bad and scary things that you can think of. They are eternal malcontents who want to tear shit down and tell you what to do because they know better. Basically they are Satan and they expect you to do a lap dance. But liberals, on the other hand, she says, they are just these beautiful fools that need the firm hand of a good conservative woman to spruce them up and, get them to see the light. But if you are a liberal or one of those radical centrist types, don't get your hopes up, because soon enough, La Femme Shapiro will cut you down to size 2, as soon as she's done using you to bash those pesky wokeists. You will have what's coming to you.
Okay, so she clearly states that there is no point in engaging with leftists and wokeists before
wokeists.
Yeah, wokeists, because there can never be any common ground. It would be hilarious, the way she totally ignores the point of the book, if it wouldn't be for the fact that it is fucking scary what she does, because she does it on purpose. Then she presents this idea that liberals exist and are somehow different from leftists, but she doesn't actually explain how. I mean, clearly leftists are all that is bad, but what are liberals? Well, she doesn't really explain what these terribly different moral values that leftists hold that are different from liberals and conservatives are, anyway. But if presumably, she read Haidt's book, she knows that we all work from the same moral values. But hey, fear-mongering is an effective tactic, so why the hell not use it?
I hate to be that person, but it's a bit hard not to bring up what Abby's brother has said several times regarding this idea of reaching across the aisle and engaging with your ideological opponents. Sure, you can argue that it's not fair to judge her based on the opinions expressed by her brother. But, if it fits, it kind of fits, right? So yeah. Ben Shapiro has said several times that there is no reason for anyone with right-wing or conservative leanings to engage with those on the left unless one is in a position to publicly destroy them in a debate, with emphasis on public.
On their kindergarten level, okay.
Yes, and as you said, kindergarten notion of winning a debate, because, I mean, unless we are talking about the very limited and specific case of debate clubs and debate, as a form of competition, debates are not won. I mean, in terms of the outcomes of a debate, hardly anyone actually knows whether or not they won or lost, because as both Haidt and eventually Abby acknowledges, people aren't impressed with your rational or reasoned arguments unless you manage to express your arguments using their moral values and language. And even if you plant some seeds in their minds, it takes time for those to bear any fruit. So, circling back to Abby Dearest and her tirade, she too does this disingenuous ritual of pleading for more civility in our discourse and reaching across the aisle and blah, 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 blah. But it's just a meaningless gesture because she doesn't lower her guard even for a second to allow for an actual discussion. It sucks. It's just posturing.
Totally, yeah. And after she does this, this extreme posturing and everything, she sort of summarizes a part of Haidt's book. It's the metaphor of the elephant and the rider. Yeah, she does that somewhat correctly. The metaphor of the elephant and the rider means, in Haidt's own words, that the mind is divided like a rider on an elephant, and the rider's job is to serve the elephant. The rider is our conscious reasoning, the stream of words and images of which we are fully aware, and the elephant is the other 99% of mental processes, the ones that occur outside of awareness, but that actually govern most of our behavior. So Haidt actually takes the time to explain. And this is one of the reasons I like this book. And of course, this is the part that Madame Shapiro actually tries to bypass. The fact that the dichotomy between cognition and emotion does not actually exist. That this idea that if we would only all manage to always use our cognition and not be emotional, all will be well in the world, is bullshit.
Yeah.
So Haidt says this, and I quote, "After failing repeatedly to get cognition to act independently of emotion, I began to realize that the dichotomy made no sense. Cognition just refers to information processing, which includes higher cognition, such as conscious reasoning, as well as lower cognition, such as visual perception and memory retrieval and others. So emotion is a bit harder to define. Emotions were long thought to be dumb and visceral, but beginning in the 1980s, scientists increasingly recognized that emotions were filled with cognition. Emotions occur in steps, the first of which is to appraise something that just happened based on whether it advanced or hindered your goals. These appraisals are a kind of information processing. They are cognitions. When an appraisal program detects particular input patterns, it launches a set of changes in your brain that prepare you to respond appropriately. For example, if you hear someone running up behind you on a dark street, your fear system detects a threat and triggers your sympathetic nervous system, firing up the fight or flight response, cranking up your heart rate, widening your pupils to help you take in more information. So emotions are not dumb. Emotions are a kind of information processing. And contrasting emotions with cognition is is as pointless as contrasting rain with weather or cars with vehicles.
I think it's so difficult in many ways to think outside this notion of not just a duality, brain versus matter, reason versus emotions, but also avoid placing one above the other, or in control of the other.
Yeah.
And I think this is basically, in a way, part of our, somewhat recent heritage, because it didn't really used to be this much of a given, taken as a given, the fact that people assume that we should strive to be as rational as possible as human beings, or that somehow rationality was the number one defining characteristic, to the detriment or to the suppression of emotion. But I haven't yet, done enough reading on that point. So maybe that's something for a future episode. But about this idea, I wanted to say that even if some people like, say, David Hume back in the day, pointed out that reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions, and can never pretend to any other office than to serve and obey them. There have been people, and there are still people, who think it is otherwise, or ought to be the other way around anyway. And it's no surprise, because the way we refer to emotions is often so disparaging. There is a very limited area in which we deem emotions as being important, essential, and welcome. And otherwise, we use the word emotional often as an insult or a way to disarm and disparage our opponent. So
yeah, absolutely. And that is why I've been annoyed by this for a long time. And why the book had like one more reason for me to like it. So Haidt also notes that moral judgment is a cognitive process, as are all forms of judgment. So the crucial distinction is really between two different kinds of cognition, intuition and reasoning. And moral emotions are one type of moral intuition, but most moral intuitions are more subtle. They don't rise up to the level of emotion. So intuition is the best word to describe the dozens or hundreds of rapid, effortless moral judgment and decisions that we all make every day. Only a few of those intuitions come to us, embedded in full-blown emotions. So when human beings evolved the capacity for language and reasoning at some point in the last million years, the brain did not rewire itself to hand over the reins to a new and inexperienced charioteer. Rather, the rider, the language-based reasoning, evolved because it did something useful for the elephant. The rider can do several useful things. It can see further into the future because, we can examine alternative scenarios in our head, and therefore it can help the elephant make better decisions in the present. It can learn new skills and master new technologies, which can be deployed, to help the elephant reach its goals and, sidestep disasters. And most important, the rider acts as the spokesperson for the elephant, even though it doesn't necessarily know what the elephant is really thinking. I mean, I think this is the most important part.
Yeah.
And, the rider is very skilled at fabricating post hoc explanations for whatever the elephant has just done. And it is good at finding reasons to justify whatever the elephant wants to do next. So once human beings developed language and began to use it to gossip about each other, it became extremely valuable for elephants to carry around on their backs, a full-time public relations firm.
Oh, yeah. And the struggle of a public relations person is often that they don't really know what the elephant was planning on doing or what they have done, and they just have to, they are put on the spotlight and, but well.
What my boss actually meant when he said that.
Yes.
Exactly. Like, that's exactly it. So... Yeah. I must admit that I really wanted, to quote all that from the book because, well, first of all, no way I could have done it justice by summarizing it, but also because of a personal reason, because I think it is such an important point and one that is ignored, and that fact brings much problems. So Haidt himself points out that once you accept this dichotomy between emotions and cognitions, society also, has this tendency to say that the rational part, the rational people, the philosophers, the scientists, because, this idea goes, way back Plato, if you,
Yeah.
in one way or another.
It just so happens that a philosopher thought that the best people to run the city or the country would be philosophers. I don't know. It just so happens.
So, so society has this tendency to place these people and to put them in a position to have more power. And it usually comes along with a utopian program for raising more rational children. So if it's one recent mantra that pisses me off, is this idea that all problems could be, solved by education. If all the world would be filled with educated people, whatever the fuck that means, because I don't know, But if only it were so, the world would be such a great place. And Haidt explains how it is a good thing to strive, towards a system that seeks good reasoning, but to never trust just one person to be the bearer of all that is truth.
Yeah. On the topic of the rider and the elephant, I get this weird feeling, and this might just be me, but I get this feeling that when people like Abby describe the idea of an individual led by emotions with a sort of front-facing rational interface, they don't really think that it applies to them as well.
Of course not.
The whole facts don't care about your feelings thing, as if facts on most things would not be pursued and interpreted by people with certain emotional backgrounds. My guess is that the same group either doesn't understand or just makes fun of the idea of emotional triggers. And this seems just weird. I mean, just like Abby, they can reproduce the idea of the rider and the elephant in their own words, but I sort of doubt that they really absorbed it, because they dismiss you when you try to tell them that, yes, certain words, images, events, and memories trigger powerful emotional reactions that then influence the reasoning of, people you might interact with daily. So, the elephant might be triggered. And I think the reason someone is a snowflake, which is basically a 21st century equal opportunity extension of the notion of female hysteria, if you ask me.
Yeah.
So the reason why, some people label others as snowflakes is not because they are inherently emotional, because we all are, like, constantly. And, we come up against this whole idea that emotions as a general thing, they are bad things to have. And we don't even talk about, okay, but like what emotions? Because why are just all emotions a bad thing to feel or to have? And the distinction, I think, for people that we identify as triggered, in my opinion at least, is that they're on the defensive. So they feel under siege, threatened physically, emotionally, or in terms of their identity and values. And, oftentimes, rightly so. And that activates a different set of reasoning tools. So it's not really that they are unreasonable or irrational, but rather their rationality, their sort of rider, the PR firm on the back of the elephant, is tasked with something different. And to that point, I think it was another book we both read, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, that noted how often you have to be careful about the differences between the question you're asking someone and the question they are giving you an answer for. I don't think he was referring to emotional triggers specifically, but personally, I would argue that the so-called irrationality and emotional responses of people when triggered are at least partly due to this, maybe. The trigger, I think, sets off a series of questions that sort of override that of their interlocutor. And then their reasoning efforts are redirected toward tackling that threat. But this is just my personal opinion.
Well, yeah, no, I
don't have any science to back this up.
No, I agree with what you say. I mean, at least for some people, I'm sure that's how it happens. Mm-hmm. But me being the more cynical person of the two of us, I don't really think what you say in the beginning is necessarily true. That the people that like Abby, that they dismiss you when you try to say something about triggering emotions. They don't dismiss you because they haven't actually absorbed the notions and ideas. They dismiss you because it doesn't fit what they want to do, and they dismiss you because they want to hurt you. And they have to dismiss the fact that people would agree with the fact that, look, I'm doing this thing and I'm actually hurting you. Mm-hmm. So I have to dismiss this hypothesis so that I can keep doing it because I'm actually making money out of that. Mm-hmm. So yeah. That's my more cynical and from Constanza opinion. So, coming back to the delightful diabolical way in which Shapiro tries to manipulate her audience, I have to quote Haidt again, just to show that Shapiro never intended to actually stick to the core points of the book. So, this is what the book says. If you really want to change someone's mind on a moral or political matter, you'll need to see things from that person's angle as well as your own. And if you do truly see it from the other person's way, deeply and intuitively, you might even find your own mind opening in response. Empathy is an antidote to righteousness. Although it's very difficult to empathize across a moral divide, somehow explaining how leftists and wokeists and whatever other ists are, I don't think that like putting them in some sort of completely different realm than conservatives. I don't think at all that, Shapiro was, being truthful when she said she wanted to actually explain this book and give people a way to talk to each other.
All people should get along, but not all people are people. This is the age-old trick. Yeah,
exactly. So I will get on to Shapiro's rest of the video, but I want to point out one other thing that I think the book does well. And that it underlines that the most likely way to change one's mind, it's through interaction, and not by being all alone at home with your big brain and just arguing with yourself, thinking really, really hard from your armchair. But the main way that we can change our minds on moral issues and, whatever other issues is by interacting with other people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now, I think that there is a caveat to that. There are people who, I would say, don't deserve your emotional investment and time if they demonstrate sort of repeatedly that they just argue in bad faith. And if they are the sort who willingly support and voice ideas and policies that end up hurting you or your loved ones, just can't reach everyone. And the whole idea of a conversation requires both parties make an effort. So
of course, not every two people talking is a conversation.
Yes. But if you are in an okay place emotionally, and once you figure out you're not engaging with utter shitbags, by all means try and talk to people, even if you feel they are wrong and that their values feel alien to you. And I would say don't expect to change their minds because, oh my God, you have these galaxy brain arguments. Because as we just discussed, probably your reasoned arguments won't reach them. And even if you discover the language through which you can communicate to them, it takes time to change. And also don't expect them to change your mind necessarily.
Of course.
Having a conversation can clarify some of your positions by having them come up against others. And also just realizing that it's possible to not get others, so to speak, to not really understand them, but still, if you manage to remind yourself that not everyone who doesn't feel the same way as you do wants to harm you, because those are different things. We can have different values up to a certain point and coexist and, whatever. So, just make sure you train yourself to view others as human as much as possible.
Absolutely. And just always think about the fact that just because somebody explained their point of view and they didn't change your mind, it's not because necessarily you are right. Mm-hmm. And just because you did your best in arguing your point and the other person didn't change their mind, it's not necessarily because your arguments were bad.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, oftentimes we just know that. I mean, it's even something we say. That, you will know it once you've had that experience, that life experience. So we already know that, for instance, if you're someone older and you tell a younger person that, you should do this and that, and they just sort of brush off your advice, and you tell them, when you're my age, you will understand, right? So we already know that some of the knowledge or some of the things that sort of might change people's behavior or change their mind requires them to live through certain experiences, even though it can be argued that the same experience can have very different outcomes in terms of the impact on someone's sort of value system or how they view the world. But anyhow, we do recognize that it's not just about argument A, argument B, and then conclusion.
Absolutely. And, we are terrible at seeking evidence that challenges our beliefs. And other people actually do us this favor, just as we are good at finding errors in other people's beliefs, they can find the errors in ours. And I had to point this out because I just finished reading a book about the history of modern philosophical thought. And the book was full of actual smart men that thought that they could solve, the world from their armchair, And very, very recently, like that was the thing to do. You didn't do any experiments. You didn't actually, you just thought about things really, really hard.
Yeah, I mean, if patriarchy did one thing right, it was ensuring above average levels of comfort for guys who were sciencing every day by means of cushy armchairs.
Yeah. And also the book points to one other of my pet peeves, of which I have many. The people that tell me, how can you say that person X is an asshole? Like maybe you misunderstood.
You're taking them out of context. Most uncharitable, shame on you.
Yeah, but I always try to explain to people, and I realize that I don't do a very good job. I try to explain to people that I try my best to keep myself open to the possibility of being wrong, but that everybody has an opinion about everybody and everything instantaneously. And I would just be lying if I said, that I can watch something and just keep myself like some thought of, some sort of chalkboard that's still, just black. Nobody has written anything on it until now. And, and until when? Presumably until I have all the information that I could ever need to assess something. But, we never know when that point is. That is exactly why the brain works like this. You just keep adding and adding information. And every single time you add something, you have an opinion. Because, that's how the brain works. And Haidt tries to explain this, that the brain evaluates instantly and constantly.
This reminds me of that thing that some people tell you, like, don't judge me. And I'm like, what? I mean, I understand, I'm being cheeky now. I understand what they mean by not judging them. But also, as you said, you cannot suppress your brain thinking something about someone. And sort of, the thing that you can do is realize that, I'm being horrible now because I've just assumed this, or maybe that I've made a harsh judgment based on something that is very limited in terms of the information, or maybe, of course, biases based on class, race, genders, etc., etc. So you can sort of, have your inner dialogue with yourself about the snap decisions or intuitions or judgments you are making, but you're making them. I mean,
of course, I mean,
it's happening.
This is not an endorsement on my part for giving my opinion as, some sort of gospel when it's actually just some half-assed thought. But it is an endorsement to accept that you have an intuition about something and then do your due diligence to see there is actually something there.
Yeah.
And but do this if the intuition is about something of importance, of course, because otherwise just fuck it. Like, you feel like a movie is shit. I mean, there is no need for higher morals, big arguments and big reasons. As long as you do not want other people to agree with you, all is good. Because this is one other thing, people tell me constantly, like, how can you say that that movie was bad? Like, what actually do you know about cinematography and directing? I'm like, fuck off, it's bad for me.
Yeah,
I don't need to. I know it's bad. That's how I know it. I watched it,
Yeah, although I think that as you said, this is a very healthy way to this is, I would say, a healthy superficiality when it comes to movies or things that are not really all that important. But I think the sad thing is that many people apply this sort of thing to their biases against that. Like I said, certain racial groups, certain minorities, certain, people with whatever, different, select X trait and then have a bias against that. And they do this like, oh, fuck it, what? No, I just saw this article with a clickbaity title that just confirmed something that I already felt. And while you want to have a discussion and you're asking for evidence and studies that support my view, or nah, fuck it. So
yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. When I realize that the subject is important and it will have an impact on other people that are not me, then I try to shut up when people ask me, well, what do you think? Especially if sometimes people ask me and it's something I just heard from them, and I'm like, I have a feeling about it, but I'm not gonna go ahead and say what I think because I don't know more. To make life easier for oneself, it's very important to split things in things that are important and have consequences in other people's lives, and my own pleasures that I do not have to explain to you. And you cannot take the words good and bad from me, because a lot of people, the crowd, it's just your opinion, man. Of course it is. But prefacing everything I say with it's just my opinion, I mean, unless you think I just generally go around quoting other people constantly, and in the weird moment I have to say this one thing is my opinion, everything is just my opinion up to a certain level. So whatever. I've had this conversation many times, and I think it's legit to say that a movie is bad and a song is bad, and everybody should take that as to understand that it's bad for you. You shouldn't just have to repeat yourself. It's bad for me, because unless you're trying to ban it from radio or something, it just means you didn't like it and you will not listen to it, whatever.
Yeah.
Who cares?
And I would also add that as you are entitled to an opinion, it's good to remember that also you are entitled to not have an opinion. And by not having an opinion, like we said, it's not about not thinking that not processing, oh, well, I do have thoughts about this, but like you're entitled to not voicing your opinions. I mean, I would argue that even for public personalities, if they're being asked about their opinion on something that is not in their area of expertise or yeah, or why do I need to know what, I don't know, random singer or even some politicians think about, as you said, movies or some sort of media scandal, or like, why are they being asked about this? And then of course, once they do have their opinion, which is, depending on which group you ask, okay or absolutely terrible, then again we get angry about that thing. Like, just
yeah we could definitely all have
we could all just shut up a bit more.
Yes, but also be a lot more,
said the ladies with the podcast.
Yeah, no, but not necessarily shutting up, but be more practical. I mean, if you're listening to a politician and he's talking about how, I don't know, Nolan is the height of directing, like that is nothing about, that has nothing to do with his political views. Just be like, bitch, please watch more movies and then move on.
You're just wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important because a lot of people just based on a couple of things place other people into a box, the bad box or the good box. And also the people that are in the bad box, they will struggle and it's very hard to get out of the bad box. But also the people in the good box, when they will eventually not voice the exact kind of thought or opinion you think it's good, you will be outraged. Like, I put you in the good box. Like, how can you betray me like good box, you know?
Yeah. How dare you be a complex human being who probably has a lot of room for improvement left.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, on that note, I think we can pause here and tackle the rest of the material in a future episode. Guys, if you like this podcast, we'd greatly appreciate it if you would follow us, and even if you did a bit of evangelizing on our behalf by sharing our episodes that you like on, whatever social media you might be active on. And if you have any suggestions, hate mail, or just want to say hi, you can write us an email or hit us up on Twitter at totally_related. Thank you for listening, and see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.